Mark suddenly finds his ex-wife, who had been missing for 4 years, had suddenly turned up to work in the supermarket outside his home. He was about to say something, only to find that his ex-wife didn't care about him. It was as if she didn't even know him. This confused him, because there was no way he could have been mistaken. To find out if she was his ex-wife or not, Mark decided to sneak in every morning after leaving the house to observe her on the pretext of work. Mary soon noticed that he was staring at her, thinking he was a pervert. Said he'd call security if he kept staring. Mark explained that he meant no harm. But you look so much like my ex-wife. The woman thought he was trying to woo her, so she ignored him. But then Mark stays here for a month. Mary was intrigued by him too. She decides to go out to dinner with him. This time the man learns that her name is Mary. She was an orphan from a poor family. Mark was convinced of this, for although she looked just like his ex-wife, but her behavior was too rude compared to that of her rich ex-wife. Mark therefore thinks that she just happens to look like his ex-wife. However, when they met again soon afterwards, he was told by Mary she had a rose tattoo on her chest, and that she had lost her memory of the past 4 years. This stunned Mark on the spot, because his ex-wife had a rose tattoo in the same place, and the 4 years coincided with his wife's disappearance. What the hell is going on here? 4 years ago he was driving his ex-wife out. The car broke down halfway because it ran out of gas. His ex-wife blamed him for going to the suburbs instead of filling up in the city just to save the 20 bucks. This made it impossible for them to move on. And the next thing that made his ex-wife even more angry was, the ex-wife found out that he was paying other women's bills instead of filling up his own car. So she had a big fight with him. The ex-wife was so angry that she got out of the car and stopped a car at the junction and left. The angry Mark didn't go after her. Who knew that because of this mistake, he never saw his ex-wife again? Mark found a police officer friend who was doing tests at the police station. He tells him about his suspicions that the waitress is his ex-wife. His friend thinks it's all just a coincidence, and that it was best not to let your current wife know. But Mark was convinced, seeing how stubborn he was. So his friend told him to steal the waitress's hair. Then he would do the test for Mark. From then on, Mark came to see Mary more often. He didn't even answer his wife's phone calls urging him to come home. Even when Mark did answer the phone, he kept excusing himself from going home with work. Ellie's instincts from being a cop. Ellie had a bad feeling about Mark, although she had been married to him for 4 years. But she knew her husband had never forgotten his ex-wife, Martha. 4 years ago she was put on the force by her father, who was a police commissioner. The first case she took on was the disappearance of her husband's ex-wife, Martha. However, she was unable to find any valuable clues. After many investigations, the case became a dead end. She was seeing Mark a lot. The two of them developed a different kind of relationship, so she married him, and together they helped Mark raise his former son. To confirm her suspicions, the next day Ellie followed Mark to the supermarket and saw him meeting the waitress. She immediately took a picture of him. Then she went home and looked up old photos and found that she looked just like Martha. This is ridiculous. A lot of outrageous thoughts flashed through her mind. She tells her best friend. However, she thought that Ellie had been mistaken, or that it was just a coincidence, because it's rare for two people to look alike in the world, except for twins, and living in a town like this at the same time. But Ellie was still unsure, so she went back to the supermarket herself. As she checked out, Ellie stared at the waitress's face. She couldn't believe that the waitress looked exactly like Martha. Ellie didn't know what to say, and when Mary saw her staring at her, suddenly she realizes who this woman is. Mary rushed out and stopped Ellie. Ellie was surprised that she knew about her. Mary said that you and Mark were the same. The first time you saw me, you both looked like you'd seen a ghost. Did you come here so I wouldn't see him again? Ellie said, I'll give you money. How much? $1 million. His wife, who has been missing for 4 years, suddenly returns home on her own, but she doesn't come into the house. Instead, she hid in a supermarket near the house to work. Husband can't believe she's back, but his ex-wife has no memory of him. To make sure she was his ex-wife or not, Mark leaves the house behind his current wife's back. He took his ex-wife's clothes from the house. He asked her to put them on. At first Mary is delighted to think that she has bought them especially for her, but it soon became clear that the clothes were old. But she changed anyway, and she put on a wig with the same haircut as Mark's ex-wife. Do I look like her to you? Oh my God. You look so much like her. For a moment, Mark thought his ex-wife of 4 years was really back. The next day Mark approached his friend. He said there was no need for a DNA test. He was almost 100% sure that Mary was his ex-wife, but his friend told him to reconsider, because he was now a man with a new family. He thought his wife Ellie didn't know, but she had already found Mary in secret. Mary also confessed to meeting her. In the end, Ellie gave her $1 million to leave Mark. The money would have lifted her out of poverty as a waitress, but Mary didn't care about the money. She gives the money back to Mark and told him everything. Mark realized that Ellie had known all along. Mark promised Mary he would talk to Ellie himself, and then he said to Mary, "You don't just look like my ex-wife. You are my ex-wife. My ex-wife doesn't like to have her neck touched, and neither do you. She has a rose tattoo on her chest, and so do you. And you happen to have lost your memory of the last 4 years. That can't be a coincidence. The police and I always thought that when she disappeared, she was killed by a murderer who showed up years ago. But now you've only lost part of your memory." And yet, when Mary heard it, she said she had an ex-husband. She said, "We were married for 10 years. And Mark said that your ex-husband must have lied to you." She saw how excited Mark was. Mary had no choice but to say, "I'll try to believe it."